Industrial plants use an absolutely staggering amount of water. But if you ever stop to think about what happens to it after it's been used, well, today we're diving into a technology that offers a pretty radical new answer. What if, instead of treating wastewater like a problem we have to get rid of, we could actually turn it into a valuable resource? Just think about that for a second. Imagine if all that water that factories use, water that's typically just discharged, could be captured and then reused over and over again. It's a huge paradigm shift we're talking about here, moving completely away from disposal and into the world of total water recovery. Now, to really get why this is such a game changer, you've got to understand the problem. Picture those huge cooling towers you see at industrial plants. Their job is to cool things down by evaporating water. But as that water evaporates, all the minerals and impurities, they get left behind. This makes the remaining water super concentrated. This leftover stuff is called blowdown, and plants have to constantly drain it and get rid of it. And let me tell you, that's a major headache, both operationally and financially.
And that's exactly where this new approach comes into play. We're looking at a technology designed to tackle this effluent problem head-on. But here's the twist. It doesn't see it as waste management. It sees it as resource creation.
And this is it, the KTVerdus technology. At its core, it's an all-in-one system that's built to turn that industrial effluent right back into high-quality fresh water. But here's the real kicker. It does it all without using any chemicals. That alone is a massive departure from most traditional water treatment methods, which, usually rely on a whole cocktail of different chemical additives. So what makes this system so special? Well, first off, like we just said, it's completely chemical-free. It also runs at a very low pressure, which means it saves a ton of energy. It's also fully automatic. We're talking 24/7 operation with no need for someone to stand there and watch it. It can even plug right into a facility's main control system, the building management system, so it works perfectly in sync with the entire site.
Okay, so theory is one thing, but what does this actually look like in practice? Let's take a look at a real-world industrial complex that put this system to the test, using it to handle the blowdown water from 4 of its giant cooling towers.
The process itself is just beautifully simple. First up, the blowdown water, that effluent we talked about, gets fed into the system. Then, the KTVerdus unit just does its thing automatically. And finally, out comes high-quality fresh water, all ready to be stored and used again. Simple as that.
And just how clean is this water? Well, the data is pretty incredible. The output water has a conductivity of less than 160 microsiemens. Now, you don't have to be a water chemist to get this. Just remember, the lower that number is, the purer the water is. We're talking exceptionally clean, high-grade freshwater here.
But this is where the system goes from being just a treatment plant to being truly smart. See, it doesn't just run on some fixed schedule. It intelligently adapts what it's doing based on what the factory actually needs, moment to moment.
And here's how that works. During the day, when the factory is running hot and the cooling towers are working hard, the system sends that purified fresh water right back to them. This creates this perfect closed loop, what's called a zero blowdown system, where literally no water is wasted. But then, at night when things cool down, the system switches gears. It starts filling up a storage tank with that fresh water, building up a reserve that the factory can use for other things the next day. It's brilliant.
Okay, so we've seen how it works, but what's the actual measurable impact here? Let's get into the data and really see how this thing stacks up. At this one site, the system produces 30 cubic meters of fresh water every single day. Now think about that. That's 30 cubic meters of water the company doesn't have to buy from the city, and it's 30 cubic meters they don't have to pay to dispose of as waste. Those savings add up really, really fast.
And honestly, this next number might be the most stunning of all. To produce all that water, the entire system uses just 1.2 kilowatts of power. To put that in perspective for you, that's about what it takes to run a normal hairdryer. For an industrial-scale water treatment system, that is an unbelievably tiny energy footprint.
This quote from someone who saw it running on site really says it all. After processing all that water, the amount of reject, or waste concentrate, is so small that they described it as just dribbling out. It's such a powerful image of just how efficient this thing is. But what about that tiny trickle of reject water? Well, even that isn't wasted. It gets sanitized with a UV treatment, which makes sure there are no bacteria or viruses. And that treated water can then be safely used for things like flushing toilets or irrigating landscaping. It really does close the loop on everything. So I think the biggest takeaway here is that this kind of technology completely reframes how we think about industrial water.
It's no longer this linear process of use it and then dispose of it. Instead, it becomes a circular system. It doesn't just treat water, it actually creates a valuable new resource right there on site.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. As industries face more and more pressure to be sustainable and efficient, could these closed-loop, low-energy systems be the future standard for how all industrial water is managed? It's a pretty compelling thought.